if I didn't want to start another business, I had to learn how to become a good investor, which is diametrically different than being a good operator, because you tend to do a lot. And the more you do as an investor, sometimes really is harmful.
Neman. He successfully built and exited two iconic businesses, JoonBug, a digital events powerhouse, and EZTexting, the largest business SMS software platform in the US.
I had an opportunity and I kind of said to myself, like, what's the magic number that would make me happy?
Today, he manages a substantial real estate portfolio, invested in over 50 startups, and authored the book called Nightlife Lessons: How I Conquered the Business of Partying with Tech. In this episode, Shane reveals the secrets behind his transition from the daily stress of running two businesses to achieving contentment and impressive financial success. Shane, hi.
Hi, how are you?
Very well, and very excited about this interview.
Likewise.
So, Shane, when I first met you at that boat event in Miami, you came across as a very, solid, stable family man. So I was quite surprised when I later found out that you spent most of your life with a strong reputation of a party animal, and even wrote a book called Nightlife Lessons about partying in New York. I spent my 20s in New York too, so I was very, very curious to compare notes and read it. But I would love you to share a little bit with my audience that part of your life.
I'm actually a native New Yorker. I was born in New York. I was born in Brooklyn. So I grew up my entire life in New York, initially Queens and then Long Island. And I went to NYU for undergrad. And I studied computer science, and I actually went to NYU Med. I was pre-med right after. So I had the thought of like going into the nightlife business was never my aspiration. I was kind of like a nerd, let's just put it that way, a little bit, a computer nerd, and I really just did computer science actually as a fallback if I didn't get into med school, because at that time, in the early '90s, you know, it was still like real. I don't know how it is now, but it was like really, really hard. And being a doctor was like the ultimate goal. I'm not sure if that's the case now, but anyway, I actually did a startup before JoonBug for about a year and a half. That was a failed startup. My roommate was at Goldman Sachs at the time, and he convinced me to drop out of med school and join the dot-com boom.
Yeah, yeah.
He's like, he said, well, look, I can raise all this money. You know how to program. We can make a great team. Let's try and do this. And I don't know, I couldn't argue with that. So I could always go back to med school, right? So anyway, got my taste of entrepreneurship through that roller coaster ride. Some people thought, some investors thought it was a good idea to give a bunch of 22-year-olds millions of dollars. Um, and we built basically what you would call Microsoft 365 now, but through Citrix. So a lot of those words that are used now, like cloud and app store and SaaS, just really didn't exist. And
Yeah.
like there wasn't even really broadband penetration that much in the late 90s. Um, and so we built a great product that was really too early for its time, and then the
Yeah.
dot-com bust happened, and we went down with the ship, just like many others. And I actually had lost all my savings too, because I had been programming on the side and making money during college, and I put my money where my mouth was, investing in the company as well. And then I don't know, through a bunch of really weird twists and turns, what happened was that I moved into my girlfriend's dorm. She was going to FIT at the time to save money. and she was working at some nightclubs on the side to make money, and I would go and pick her up or go with her sometimes, and like, she was getting paid at 3 in the morning, and it was really kind of backwards. There was no systems in place. It was all pen and paper. It didn't really make a lot of sense. And I actually saw an opportunity there. So JoonBug basically built. I went back to not my dorm room, but her dorm room, and I was coding.
Mhm.
So it was like kind of cliche in that respect. And we built a platform for basically nightclubs and bars, like it's same as like Toast does for restaurants,
Yeah.
to run their business on. And then that grew really, we became the de facto software stack. That grew into a really large business, and then it really took off when we added ticketing. And there
Hmm.
were really no, sorry, there were really no, like Ticketmaster was not serving smaller venues, and there
Hmm.
was there was no Eventbrite. You have to understand, this is like a pre MySpace, pre Facebook, pre camera
Yeah.
phone time,
Yeah.
right? Um, People can't remember that time, right? But like
Yeah.
2001, those things were not really happening. And nothing, we hit a niche. There was a need for it. It was easy to scale because there wasn't very many. No one was really thinking in that vertical
Hmm.
about tech and nightlife and that kind of thing. Was able to grow a really big business out of it,
Hmm.
and really learn um, how to get screwed in every possible way you can ever get screwed in business,
Yeah.
because I mean, you're dealing with nightclub owners and unscrupulous people,
I can
that are
imagine a
really,
very special kind of crowd. Yeah.
yeah, really short-sighted people, hard to convince, hard to monetize on. So if you can really crack that market, they say, like, if in New York, if you can make it there, you can make it anywhere. They
Yeah.
should change that for, like, if you can make it in nightlife in New York, you can make it anywhere, because the hustle is real,
Yeah.
and it's a dog eat dog kind of industry for sure. Very, very, very fickle.
So why did you decide to sell? How did that happen?
I was getting a little bit older, so I had started Junebug when I was, like, let's say, like 24. I remember something
Hmm.
like 23 or 24. It was a few years after med school and the failure of that
Hmm.
company. I had been doing it for about 8 or 9 years at that point. And what happened was is that actually during in 2005, six, what happened was is that we realized that we had phone numbers for a lot of people, and we also built like a marketing stack where people could send emails out and
Hmm.
sell their tickets and market. And we realized we had everyone's phone number, and there was no way to text them. And
Hmm.
texting was just really starting to kind of take off in the United States with Blackberries and that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. And and so, if you can't find it, you build it.
Yeah.
I built it initially internally for our company. Used it. It was like a silver bullet magic.
Hmm.
Cut through all the clutter of the inbox and spam, and no
Hmm.
one was really doing it. And it had crazy open rates and response rates. And people were asking me, "How did you do that? How did you do that?" And then I realized that that could become a business in itself. If you can imagine, like a Mailchimp or a Constant Contact for
Yeah.
texting, you know, just didn't exist. And so we spun that out. It was called EZTexting,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so I ran those two for like a year or two together.
Hmm.
And then I realized that EZTexting had much more potential. It could become a really, really big business,
Yeah.
and not that nightlife, not like Junebug wasn't a big business, but it was also the shiny new object. I had been doing that one
Yeah.
for the other one for 8 years, and so we just called up our competitor, that was always kind of nipping at our heels, and said, "Hey, look, it's either now or never. If you've always
Hmm.
wanted this opportunity, we're willing to sell." And then I took a lot of the capital from the sale of that
Yeah.
of JoonBug and kind of pumped it into EZTexting, and then did that for another like 8 or 9 years. So
So you
yeah.
didn't take any break in between them because you already had the second company to run.
Yeah, I had a successful company that was actually
Yeah.
making money. And so I had a lot of drive to build
Yeah.
that business as well.
So by the time you sold Easy Texting, it had been like 20 years of nonstop building, wasn't
Right?
it? Or
Close.
almost.
Yeah. Yeah, it was almost, yeah, yeah, it was. It was like
And
19 years or something.
and
Yeah.
that's when it was the first time when you had a chance to stop and actually think about your life, wasn't it?
I don't think I really thought about much else than work, to be
Yeah.
honest.
Hmm.
Work, and then, I had time to kind of go out and, be young and party a little bit and, that kind of stuff. But I mean, as a practical matter, even though I was in the nightlife business, I really wasn't like going and drinking
Yeah.
and doing crazy
Yeah.
stuff. I mean, I would go out, but like any normal person would. But I went to the office at like 9 in the morning, like everyone else, and I had employees, and I might have had access to certain things that people didn't have, which was
Well,
cool, and it made it
from the
fun.
outside, for
But
most people, it looked like you were partying all day long
no, I
because
wish
of
that
the
was
industry you were in.
no. It's very hard to do that, and have a multi-million-dollar company with a lot of employees and that kind of stuff. And
Of
well,
course.
I mean, I guess you can build it like that, but to maintain it, it'll fall apart if you don't.
So, so Shane, fast forward to your exit from Easy Texting. Why did that happen?
So I think, like a lot of people who get to a certain level, I was, always constantly under the stress of my business. I lived and breathed my business, and I had just met my current wife. I had, and I wanted to have a family.
Hmm.
um, I wanted to see her more, obviously,
Yeah.
because it was craziness. Like, I'm sure just like a lot of startup founders, experience, you're working all hours. I had a team in Ukraine. We had a whole office in Ukraine, so that
Hmm.
time zone was different. Um, there are emergencies that you have to put out,
Yeah.
that constantly come up, and you
So it
know,
was your burnout essentially. You got tired and
it
you
was
just
my
wanted a
burnout.
break.
I tried to replace myself, and take that classic advice and delegate, and I guess I just wasn't too good at it, just to be honest. In retrospect, um, I tried, hiring people that I thought could replace me.
Hmm.
It was easier said than done. Nobody kind
Yeah.
of really fit the bill, and then I tried to delegate, and that didn't work too well for me either. Uh, and I had an opportunity to sell because someone, I was getting approached because I had a
Hmm.
company that was a SaaS company that was growing, at least 40-50% a year. It had like
Hmm.
60-70% margins. We were
Yeah.
profitable. Like no one had seen
Amazing.
something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I had an opportunity, and I kind of said to myself, at what point, like, what's the magic number that would make me happy,
Hmm.
essentially? And I'd be willing to kind of give this up and, like, figure something else out,
Hmm.
that kind of thing. And, it happened. Someone was willing to give me, my number. And I was going to be happy with that, and with my decision. And in retrospect, now, the easy texting is much bigger than when I
Yeah.
10 years ago, and I would have had a much bigger company, arguably, and many other
Hmm.
things. But I would have never given it up because I was able to experience so many other things.
So no
Uh,
regrets. No regret.
No, I mean, like, if you looked at it only financially, it would be regrettable,
Yeah.
possibly. Um,
Yeah.
but I got to, move to Miami, first of all.
Mm-hmm.
I would
Mm-hmm.
have never been able to do that from New York. I had my first daughter, my first child 10 years
Yeah.
ago, and I was really, truly present for her, and I got
Mm-hmm.
to experience that. Um, and then, I really pivoted at that point because I realized that if I didn't want to start another business,
Mm-hmm.
I had to learn how to become a good investor,
Yeah.
which is diametrically different
Yeah.
than being a good
Yeah.
operator, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes, because you tend to do a lot, and the more you do as an investor, sometimes really is harmful. Um, and also just kind of learning how to shift your mindset into an investor's mindset versus a builder's mindset is very different.
How,
So that that
what
I've been
helped you?
trying to do that for 10
Yeah,
years.
what helped you in your transition? Because at least to me, you look like an exceptionally successful investor, and you seem to be very happy being one. And that's not necessarily very common in our post-exit founder community, as you know. Lots of people feel very miserable
Yeah.
investing instead of
Uh,
building.
I, yeah, so I think there's a couple of things. First of all, I think a lot of people fall into the trap of identifying themselves with what they do, or their company. I thankfully really never had that thing. Like I never like saw myself as EZTexting, or I never saw myself as JoonBug. I saw it more of like an ends to a means. Like it's what I did. It wasn't who I was.
Yeah.
Not that I didn't. I liked what I did. I did. I mean, I loved aspects of what I did,
Yeah.
but like as a founder, you do a lot of shit that you really don't want to do,
Of
just to be
course.
honest. And that what makes you a good founder is like your willingness to do things that other people won't do, right?
Yeah.
So uh, I think you're looking at something that's 10 years in the making, right? So possibly in the beginning, I don't think you would have said the same thing like looking at me. It was a process for me.
Yeah.
I had to learn. I made a lot of mistakes. There were a lot of times where I kind of had these false starts where I thought that I would start a new business, and then I had to kind of hold myself back and be like, "Wait, this is? Am I sure I want this? You know, is this extra X amount that I possibly could make going to make me happy, or do I value my time?" And being able to control my own time, which I can now, right? For the most part. I mean, there's always exceptions to the rule, but I think that it's just as hard as initially of doing a startup, in terms of finding your footing,
Yeah.
uh, and it's a lot of mistakes and learning from your mistakes.
So
I think
what were the biggest mistakes in terms of types of investments? Not necessarily, we don't necessarily need all the details, but what, for example, if I just sold my company and I would be asking you, can you please tell me what to avoid investment wise? What would you tell me?
I think what I would say is there isn't like a particular type of investment that I think you should avoid. I think all investments can be, all different asset classes can be good investments if you know what you're doing. I think what you really need to do is truly figure out. I think the key is figure out who's really good investor, and who really knows what they're talking about, and who's an expert in that field, and you know learning from them. um, and I think that if you really like to learn, bless you.
Thank you.
uh, yeah, yeah, if you really like to learn and you bring yourself to a place where you know you're curious about everything, and you can become interested. And I think, listen, people like what they're good at, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
once you kind of get some small successes, right, under your belt, you start to like it better. Obviously, you
Yeah.
don't like it when you lose, and it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't feel good, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, but when you're winning, it feels good. And some people, all of a sudden win and then think they're like a genius, right? And they don't
Mm-hmm.
realize that a lot of luck goes into it
Of
too.
course.
But I think I think instead of trying to avoid certain asset classes and saying this asset class
Mm-hmm.
is bad or whatever, I think the better idea is trying to surround. And by the way, if you're in YPO or Tiger 21 or any of these other kind of
Mm-hmm.
organizations, um, there's so many people who've made it in all these
Yeah.
different industries that you can leverage, and speak to. And like, for me, I'm in Tiger, right? I'm in a few other things as well.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a few guys that I met that, like, are really crypto guys, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you know if you ask people at different times, crypto could have been the worst asset class
Yes.
or the best asset class you
Of
could have been
course.
in, right?
Yeah.
So it all really depends on anything. But like, I really, pick their brain. I talk to them. I'm interested. I learn. I maybe take small bets so I can learn, um, and that kind of thing before I kind of come up
Mm-hmm.
with my own thesis. Or I also think that one of the things that I did that was very important, that I think was a building block in my success, was that I found initially a wealth manager
Mm-hmm.
that was willing to teach me, not
Okay.
just kind of like just do it and then like I
Mm-hmm.
had to listen to them. They were willing to sit down and tell me why they were doing certain things or why they thought something was a good investment and really take me through it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I did that for a few years initially until I
Mm-hmm.
could feel confident about myself being able to do that later on. And
Mm-hmm.
it was like, it was a process. It was a few years. But now I do that myself, and I feel confident enough, that I can kind of take bets in a way that you
Yeah.
know
But it
would
sounds
would
like
benefit.
it sounds like it took you years to identify those people and then learn what you needed to learn, right? So
Oh yeah, and
maybe
I made a lot of mistakes.
yeah,
There were a lot of people who I thought were experts,
yeah.
and like, people tell you real estate's safe. Well, I made like 3 or 4 real estate investments that went to zero, if you can believe
Oh wow.
that, right?
Wow.
Yeah, because I was LP. I got wiped out as pref equity,
Mm-hmm.
because or I bought office.
Yeah.
We bought office like 6 7 years
Yeah.
ago, right? And
Yeah.
it's gonna go to zero, right?
Yeah.
And so, and then there were other real estate guys that I did business with that, like, I made tons of money with, and they were
Yeah.
right. Um, so I think it's unavoidable. I think you have to kind of also think of it as a game,
Mm-hmm.
and not take it too seriously. Some people are really kind of too focused on not losing, and
Yeah.
instead of learning.
Yeah.
Um, that's not to say to take these crazy bets where if you
Yeah.
lose, you lose everything. The idea is to take as many good bets as you possibly can, and you can play a perfect poker hand and still lose, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But you have to kind of come to terms with that, right?
So Shane, in my own experience and my observation so far is that for most people, they first lose quite a lot, not necessarily quite, but some of their exit wealth before
Right.
it starts growing. So most people expect when they sell the company and then they calculate what kind of rate of return they want, they expect that curve to go straight up. But it almost never happens because that learning is always costly. Did you find that true for yourself as well?
Yeah, of course. I went down before I went up.
Yeah.
I was freaking out, by the way, when we went
Yeah.
up. Just like,
Yeah. Yeah.
because
Same happened
you
to
know,
me. I totally
yeah,
understand. Yeah.
and I think that's actually where a good financial advisor is a big
Mm-hmm.
asset, is more so not telling you what to buy,
Mm-hmm.
or explaining it to you, but kind of keeping you emotionally in check,
Yeah.
um, and not doing things that you're not supposed to do. I think being an investor, I mean, if you look at the best investors like a Buffett or some of these other
Mm-hmm.
guys, I mean, they're on the spectrum, right? So they don't like experience emotion like most people do. And so they're able to make judgment calls emotionless, without emotion. And it serves them very well in investing.
Yeah.
Um, it's very hard to be like that.
Yeah.
Uh,
Also, you can't be a successful entrepreneur like that because you actually have to have lots of passion, so other people catch that passion from you and get energized by you. I
correct.
totally agree with you. Most entrepreneurs, if anything, are very emotional, uh, even though they learn not to show it over time.
Fear, whether it's greed, whether it's whatever it is,
Yeah.
whether it's like just altruism or whatever it is that's driving them, it's the
Hmm.
extreme of that that makes them successful, and
Yeah.
it's actually the downfall of the investor, right?
So from the practical standpoint, how did you turn yourself into a Warren Buffett type and stop being emotional?
By the way, I am not nearly. I'm not. That is like really not what I am. I think I've done pretty well, but I am not. Listen, I think like every other entrepreneur, right? I'm always hardest on myself, but I'm by far not the best investor. I think, I'm constantly learning and I still make a lot of mistakes. But now I think I make fewer mistakes than I did 10 years ago. Let's just put it that way, which I think is just the key, uh, to being, a pretty decent investor. Um, but look, I think I do a lot of things that a lot of people don't want to do because it's not fun to do, right?
Hmm.
Uh, it's just, it's the same thing as being an entrepreneur, right? Like you do a lot of things that, like I would sweep the floors if I had to in my
Hmm.
startup. There was nothing beneath me to do.
Yeah.
Um, I keep a decision journal when I make major decisions, and
Oh,
so
wow.
and then every 3 months, every quarter, I review the decisions, and it's like a giant pain in the ass to do. It takes like a long time, and it's like tedious. And I have my own methodology of how to do it, but I use like my note app, and I go back and I re-go back to even decisions that I made years ago, and I try and learn from them so that I can make better things, or actually it shifts my perspective sometimes, because sometimes a decision that I may have made a few years ago in the short term might have the outcome of it might have been perceived as bad, let's just say,
Hmm.
but it actually turned out to be really good. If you waited long enough, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Or vice versa. It was great in the short term, but turned out to be
Hmm.
bad in the long term.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
and that might still change too, by the way, in like 5 years from now. Um, so I think, doing those types of things, it's hard to do. It's a giant pain in the ass, and a lot of people will think
Yeah.
of it as pointless.
How did you get yourself excited about it?
I'm not like excited about real estate. Let's just put it that way, right? Like I do real estate and like I'm pretty good at it, let's say, because I have a lot of experience with it and it
Hmm.
makes money, and but I don't like love real estate like some people might love real estate, and I don't love stocks and bonds, and I don't love,
Hmm.
certain things. But I really do love venture, right? And
Hmm.
so what I do is, I allocate correctly, for me and my
Hmm.
tolerance, and where I am. And I spend like 40% of my time on stuff that I don't love,
Hmm.
right? And then I spend 60% of my time on venture,
Hmm.
which I love.
Hmm.
And that gives me time with, let's say, really smart other founders, startup founders, early stage, late stage founders.
Hmm.
And I look at a lot of different companies. I read their decks. I spend time with them. I call them. I invest. And then I also, help them along. Actually, the book that I wrote was a result of the so much of the time
Yeah.
that I spent saying the same stories over and over to
Hmm.
them. And
Yeah.
the way I structured it was, each chapter was a lesson that I learned. That's why it's called Nightlife Lessons.
Yeah.
And then I kind of circled it back to like how I use that lesson in another company that I either did or I invested in, or how I use it in my
Hmm.
everyday investing, which I thought would be helpful. It's not
Hmm.
just like kind of like bullshit advice that you hear that's like esoteric and like no one really
Yeah.
thinks. So I think the key is that spending doing what you have to do, right? Like I have to do the other 40% because it's still very important.
Hmm.
I don't love it. I don't hate it, but I don't love it. And it's a necessary thing for me to do to be able to spend the other 60,
Hmm.
50% of my time doing stuff that I really love,
Yeah.
and I'd like to do.
So you basically have the sense you basically have the sense of responsibility for your wealth, and that's what
Oh,
drives that 40%, and then 60% of your time is.
no one's gonna give a damn about your wealth except for you, trust me. No wealth advisor, no one is gonna really give a damn because like you and your family, or your whoever else, your significant other are the ones that are going to care the most, right?
Of
Because
course.
it directly affects you. So how could you not? You have a real responsibility to make,
Hmm.
to yourself to make that happen.
And venture investments mostly come from love, or you also feel that it's a good investment decision?
If you're in a position where you want to grow, have long-term wealth, right? Um, you really have to have a pretty good exposure to things like venture or venture
Hmm.
like asset classes, in order to defy wealth destruction. Just even if you were able to, let's say, maintain, right? I think a lot. It's very hard to live, for people to think in long scale time frames. But it was funny. I actually went. You know, I listened to. I went to a dinner and Michael Saylor was he's like a Bitcoin maximalist. MicroStrategies. I don't know if it's a
Hmm.
public company. They own most of it. And he spoke at the dinner. It was actually at his house.
Hmm.
And so he lives here in Miami, and he got up in the middle. It was like 40, 50 people in his house. It was a
Hmm.
big ballroom. And he's like, yeah, I just got my house appraised for like $48 million. And you're
Hmm.
like thinking to yourself, why is this guy telling me this? But he's like, I bought it for, I don't know, 30 million like 5 years ago or 6 years
Hmm.
ago. And then this house was built by a family who came here in the 1920s, and they built this house and the house next door for $120,000. Now, the reason why I'm telling you this is that if they took that $120,000 and buried it in the ground and gave it to their grandchildren right now wouldn't even be able to buy a square foot of my driveway with that
Hmm.
$120,000. And so if you think about it, that's like just two generations, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so, that's not going to happen with bonds, right? It's not going to happen
Hmm.
with treasuries. It's not going to happen with, and I'm not saying you shouldn't have some, in my opinion. And by the way, again, I'm not like the best investor at all, but I try and kind of emulate who I think are the better
Hmm.
investors. Which, if you look at like endowments or those types of people, they have a really healthy um, allocation to venture, right?
Hmm.
Or much larger, let's just say, to venture, because
Hmm.
they're really thinking, you know, 50 years out, 60 years out, maybe 100
Hmm.
years out sometimes. And so, you have to get alpha in order to maintain wealth
Hmm.
over time, because the value of your money is being destroyed unless like Michael Saylor gets his way and like Bitcoin becomes the universal currency, and then
Yeah.
then you can't, inflation would stop. But I don't know,
Hmm.
that's a totally different bet.
Shane, switching away from investing to your personal life. So,
Sure.
can we go back again to that moment when you sold EZTexting? You are free from your businesses. You have a chance to stop and think and heal from whatever it is you may have hurt during 20 years of grinding. How did you feel on that day when you sold it?
I felt really happy. I'm not gonna lie.
Mm-hmm.
It was amazing. I saw a lot of money in my bank account.
Mm-hmm.
I was newly married, and I just saw a lot of potential. I saw a
Yeah.
lot of potential ahead of me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and then I would maybe say a month later, reality kicks in again, and
Okay.
nothing really changed. Nothing's
Yeah.
really changed.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know. For me, I was never like a person that like said, "Oh, if I get this, I'm gonna buy a Ferrari, or I'm gonna buy,"
Mm-hmm.
like I was just never that person. I never really cared. I mean, I like nice things. Don't get me wrong. Like,
Yeah.
but I'm not like doing it for that. I think everyone likes nice things, right? Like, like a
Yeah.
nice vacation or whatever, that kind of thing. But like, I wasn't like ever thinking to myself, like I want to buy a boat, or I want to buy like a plane, or like those things
Mm-hmm.
would just never were like things that were goals of mine. Let's just put it that way. Um, but then the reality kind of really set into me, being like, wait, how do I not only not lose this now, right? But how do I make this last forever, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, I had a really keen understanding of that would need to happen pretty
Mm-hmm.
quickly,
Mm-hmm.
because all of a sudden, I was on payroll. I stayed for like another year, let's just say, but like I wasn't getting paid anything close to like what I was getting paid before. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I was like, oh well, my income's gone, right?
Yeah.
So I'm gonna either have to work again, or try and figure out a way to make this last a really long time and grow it.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know how I was going to do that, so that became another source of stress. Let's just say a different source of
Of course.
stress. The only difference was that it wasn't like at all hours of the day and putting out fires, and it was a different kind of stress that was, I think, for me at least, more manageable,
Mm-hmm.
um, and didn't like all consume me. Let's just
Mm-hmm.
say.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so listen, there's problems on each side, right? It's
Yeah.
just you have to choose which problems you want,
Did,
basically, at
did you feel sad that you no longer had the team and the structure and the familiar environment and the business that was growing? Was sadness part of your um, how you felt at the moment?
I had a like a pretty hard childhood. I didn't have like a bad childhood, but I had a pretty hard childhood. I
Mm-hmm.
lost my father when I was 13. My mother was like perpetually ill her entire life. We lived a pretty comfortable life, a good life,
Mm-hmm.
like a middle class life kind of
Mm-hmm.
thing. And my mom worked, and I saw her kind of work despite her illness, and like if she could make it, like
Mm-hmm.
I could, I could make it, kind of thing. Like, so a lot of people ask like who your mentor is or whatever. It was
Mm-hmm.
obvious for me, it was my mom, because like she was able to accomplish a lot being really ill her entire
Mm-hmm.
life. Um, and I kind of really understood the concept of non-permanence of things. Let's
Okay.
just say,
Yeah.
and being able to accept change at a rapid
Mm-hmm.
pace. My mom was ill and in and out of the hospitals all the time and stuff like that. So things would change for me a lot,
Mm-hmm.
all the time, and I would make plans and like go away, and then I stopped making plans because a lot of
Mm-hmm.
times it would get canceled because I was in the unknown a lot of the times.
Mm-hmm.
So the impermanence of things kind of was staple in my life. Maybe I learned
Yeah.
that earlier in life. So I don't know. I think, being for me it wasn't that difficult to deal with change because I
Mm-hmm.
had that a lot
Yeah.
happen to me
Yeah.
earlier.
Makes sense.
Um,
Yeah.
but like, yeah, listen, did I kind of miss it a little bit? Yes, I did, but thankfully I had other things that I had was like really grateful for. Like
Yeah.
I had a child and I was having that experience, and we moved to Miami and I had that experience. So,
Yeah.
um, I kind of replaced it with things that, occupied me
Yeah.
essentially.
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds like you had a lot on your hands. Didn't have the luxury to feel sad, right?
Yes, I think that's actually something that I got from my mom. She never like didn't she never was like felt sorry for herself
Mm-hmm.
because she never had the time. She just, pushed through, right? Like I think
Yeah.
that's maybe a coping mechanism that a lot of people use, basically.
Did, did you do anything for your health specifically? Because we get quite burnt out after entrepreneurial experience. And as you know, we have lots of common friends who go really, really extreme into biohacking or extreme sports, like really focus on their health and physical development. Did that happen to you?
It did. It did. And I still, to a degree, do it. So,
Mm-hmm.
like, I still do cold plunging. I have a cold plunge. I do sauna.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but then I kind of like took it to a pretty extreme for a few years when I turned 40, like 7 years ago, 6, 7 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I got diagnosed with prediabetes, and I wasn't obese or anything like that. It
Mm-hmm.
was really shocking, to be honest.
Yeah.
Um, and going to med school, like I understood how bad that really is
Mm-hmm.
for your prognosis, let's just say, of like all the bad things that can happen to you afterwards, especially at the age of 40, is very young, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I took it really seriously.
Mm-hmm.
They were like telling me that I needed to exercise more, and they wanted to put me on metformin. At that time, it wasn't like kind of known that metformin makes you live
Yeah,
longer.
now it's
So
very
now,
trendy.
yeah, now it's like trendy but like it was really scary for me at that point. I'm like, I'm not gonna go on like
Yeah.
diabetes med, right? So people like microdose that now. Um, but so I found this program called Mastering Diabetes, which is like a health program with eating and exercise. It's low oil, like very low oil, all kinds of oil. You can't really have oil that's considered a processed food. So whole non-processed foods. And so I went on that, and it was also vegan for a while, for like many years after that.
Wow.
So that yeah that ended up working, and then I started doing a bunch of weightlifting. So I
Mm-hmm.
got I got a trainer that kept me accountable. And then I did like the other things that people do. Like I got like IV NAD, but like I don't think
Yeah.
that these things
Yeah.
work. I did it a bunch of
You
times,
tried
and
it all.
like yeah, I did a bunch of those things, and I was like on Resveratrol and a bunch of these other
Mm-hmm.
things that just I don't know. I think I've like kind of whittled it down to one or two things. I take
Yeah.
athletic greens every day.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Disclosure, I'm an investor in athletic greens, but I take it every day because it
Fine.
has a thing. Has so I take that every day, and so it has like all the multivitamin and probiotics in it. I take I take vitamin D. I take like a few things like
Mm-hmm.
that. And then I do cold plunge and sauna pretty much, and I work out. I
Yeah.
work out. I do weight training.
Yeah.
Um, but like I kind of like did 6 or 7 years of this like really extreme. I got to like 6% body fat at one point,
Oh, wow.
which was like even crazier
That's
than when I was in
probably
high
not
school.
very healthy.
I was like all my stats. I had a continuous glucose monitor. Like I
Yeah.
did like the
Yeah.
whole thing, right?
Yeah.
Um, but like again, it all consumed me because I treated it like it was my startup, right?
Exactly. That's where I was getting to, because I think that's exactly what happens to lots of people. They focus on their health with the same intensity and fanatism as they did on the business, and in a way it helps. It's not bad, but it's just a curious phenomenon I find. And then it
Yeah, I
takes a
mean,
few
I think
years, and people get sort of lose interest,
burned out. They burned out of it.
burn
Yeah.
out.
Yeah, so I don't do it as extreme. I did that. I did get burned out, although thankfully I didn't like let it all go. I still work out regularly and I do a few of the things that I think are the most impactful.
Yeah.
But listen, it's a fun journey if you like
Yeah.
it, and there could be worse things that you do for
Oh,
sure.
absolutely. I'm
Yeah,
absolutely with you. Yeah.
yeah.
I guess I like to think about it as this momentum. You know, you spend 20 years going with full force somewhere, you create even bigger force, and then you just keep going with that force after your exit. You have to send that energy somewhere. And sometimes people just go crazy with investing before they learn how to do it. I made that mistake, and lots of people we know do. But other people channel it into health, and maybe that's a better option. If you have to channel it somewhere, you should go to health probably, than silly
Not a bad
money
thing to do.
decisions.
I mean, if you overdo it on your health, it's not a bad thing for sure. I think a lot of also post-exit founders, let's just say, or post-exit people, they have this false sense of thinking that just because they had an exit that they're smart. Let's just say in every other field of everything that they do. Um,
True. Yeah.
so that also contributes to like
Definitely.
this, investing thing, where they
Yes.
where they make mistakes in
Yeah.
investing.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely.
So
It's like you mentioned your business would have like 60-70% margin, and of course it's very hard then to settle for what private bankers advise you to do. There are no asset classes really out there that you can both control largely and have this kind of return.
yeah, you end up taking too much risk, and just because, like, let's say if you're in tech, you think you know tech,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And then you conflate good tech with a good business, because those aren't necessarily two good things, right?
Yeah.
I mean, those are two they're not the same things. Um, yeah, 100%. And I guess yeah, you're trying to push the boundaries just like you did as a founder,
Yeah.
and that doesn't work out too well for you in
Yeah.
the short term, at least with unless you really know what you're doing.
We all learn these humility lessons. Most of these patterns and mistakes are quite predictable if you talk to enough people. So, what would you say your main humility lessons were?
So I took a decision making course during COVID. Um, so if you think about it, no one really kind of like teaches you how to make good decisions. Like, I've
Yeah,
never taught that
which is the most important thing we do in life, but no one teaches you.
100%. And I went into this thing. I paid like $1,200 for it. It's by this guy named Shane Parrish. It's called the Knowledge
Oh yeah,
Project.
yeah, of course, yeah,
So I listened to his podcast. I really like
yeah,
him a lot. Very smart guy. Um, and he has this course, and I'm like, you know what? I don't know. I didn't have much to do anyway during COVID. Let's just
yeah,
say, and I'm like, I'm gonna take this thing and whatever. I went into it really arrogant, thinking that I am like one of the best decision makers out there, and I know everything about decision. Like, what is
Yeah.
this guy going to teach me? And I realized that I really had no clue of how to make a good decision. And I wasn't doing any of these things that I now do a lot, right?
Yeah.
And, um, just basic things of like, even kind of like categorizing the kind of decision that you're making. Is this decision reversible? Is
Yeah.
it is it really important? Is it or is it binary, or could there be a third option
Mm-hmm.
that could solve your problem? There's a lot of techniques that you can
Mm-hmm.
use.
Mm-hmm.
Am I really finding, do you think about the second and third order implications of any decision that you might make, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because, you might change something in something that's working, but you don't know, like you never think through what like the implications might be that might have adverse effects for you, or even
Yeah.
positive effects for you. So, anyway, that was a really, like kind of moment of clarity for me.
You were probably thinking, how did I create two super successful companies and sold them without knowing how to make decisions, right?
No, you really underestimate how much luck has to do with it.
Yeah.
It really does. I think, not that I was like I wasn't the worst decision maker,
Of
like,
course not.
but I certainly was not, like, let's say, a really great one, that I was able to do that. So, I think, I can tell you about like the 50 bad decisions, the 50 bad investments I made
Mm-hmm.
and stuff like
Mm-hmm.
that. Or I don't even know, you know, a bunch of really stupid things that I did in my businesses that I shouldn't have done, or that kind of stuff that really kind of, brought me back to earth.
Yeah. But I'm
But
curious about a post-exit when had two successes, you had all the right to feel you know it all. Then one amazing humility lesson you just mentioned, learning that you
yeah,
don't even know how to make decisions. I think is brilliant. I love it. I also
yeah, yeah,
took a course by Shane, but it was on mental models, on creating mental models. I also thought it was
yeah.
very helpful. Yeah.
I read
It
his
was.
book on mental
Oh, you did.
models.
Yeah,
They're
yeah, yeah. That's
they're
cool.
they're, they're really, he's a, I mean, I think, this is also you know this is also part of that process, is if you can be really introspective about yourself, and be willing to change. That's a very good trait for any investor, and that's part of why I took these classes, and I was
Mm-hmm.
like amenable to doing it, is because I wanted to kind of, making better decisions is the same thing as like making better investment
Yeah.
decisions, right? Not just like, your other decisions that you make in your life. And
Mm-hmm.
so, I wanted to really maximize how I did that, um, and improve myself.
Yeah.
So, that, I think, the biggest humility thing was like, I never in my other businesses, um, except for like my lawyers and my accountants and stuff, I never really relied on anyone,
Mm-hmm.
let's just say. Um,
Yeah.
and and so, like, when it came to relying on a wealth manager, that was a hard thing too, because
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, it's kind of messed up to say, but like I was like looking at the guy, and I'm like, this guy's telling me what to do, and like, I just like sold this business, and how does he know better than I do? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Of course. I know exactly what you mean, Shane.
Yeah. So, I don't know, like I went through a bunch of wealth managers, and they probably all thought I was a giant dick, just to be honest with you, in the
Yeah.
beginning. So, but I had to change. I had to change because, A, first of all, nobody would want to deal with me. And second, I wanted to learn from that person. I had to bring myself, like, bring that ego down and be like, this guy obviously knows something that I don't know, and like, I need to learn.
Yeah.
or this girl, or I say guy, but I
Yeah.
mean guy or girl.
Shane, I've been researching the whole post-exit journey and talking to people for 13 years now, and I came
Hmm.
to one conclusion I'm absolutely sure of, that the root cause of all the mistakes is just not taking that time to introspect, not doing it properly, not doing it long enough, not doing it deep enough. All mistakes come from there. So I'm so happy to hear about you taking the decision-making course and doing it actually. That explains a lot in terms of you now being in a much happier place.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yes, it's like willing to do what a lot of people won't do, right? Or
Yeah.
they think it's stupid.
Yeah.
Um, I,
But it's
I mean, I
tough.
can
It's
see that.
tough. It's
Yeah.
tough. Introspection is very tough, especially for people who spend most of their adult lives interacting with the reality and making decisions fast and being very action driven. And then suddenly shifting our gaze inwards is hard work. It feels very unnatural.
It's funny. I listened to a podcast by Sid Guru today. I don't know if you follow him, but he's really amazing. And at the end, they were like, "What do you want everyone to like get from this?" And it was like a 2 hour podcast. It was live,
Hmm.
right? He
Hmm.
was he was giving a talk live, and they're like, "What do you want people to do after this?" And he's like, "Well, I can't make anyone do, but I want them to realize that the only way out is from within."
How do
So
you want to be remembered?
honestly, just like as a good dad and good husband, that made people that other people like. Let's just put it that way. That
Beautiful.
contribute to society, and people like to be around, and make other people feel good. I mean, I have no delusions that like anyone's gonna even remember me in 100 years from now, because like I don't remember anyone from 100 years from now that was my ancestor. So you know, it's weird to think about it that way, but it's actually like I don't understand the concept of legacy and those types of things, because at the end of the day, really, maybe like now somebody will remember you from like Instagram or something. I don't know, but even that'll probably go away at some point.
Shane, this is so beautiful. I'll let you go so you can be a good person and a good father for
Oh,
your
thank you so
wonderful
much. I
three
really
kids.
enjoyed this. Thank you so much. You
Thank you
too.
so much. I loved it a lot. A great conversation.
Great. Me too. Thank you so
Bye,
much.
Shane.
Appreciate it.